Salvete, I'm Madeline Weiner. I write Latin books and ramble about Roman history here on YouTube. Today, I want to tell you about Saturnalia, the Roman festival of role reversal and gift-giving that took place in late December. And to talk about Saturnalia, I need to tell you about Saturn. No, not that Saturn. Definitely not. There we go. You might recognize Saturn as the Roman version of the Greek Kronos. Now, quick pop quiz. What is the relationship between Roman gods and their Greek counterparts? If you said that the Romans just copied the Greek gods and changed their names, sorry, you're wrong. The Romans did adopt the mythological system of the Greeks, but they'd already been worshipping their own gods under those names for centuries beforehand. So the Romans took their own gods with their own personalities and stories and shoehorned them into the existing Greek stories. That means that the Roman versions of the gods carry all kinds of baggage with them that interact in interesting ways with the Greek stories they suddenly star in. Saturn is an interesting example of this. You're probably familiar with the Greek story of Kronos. He overthrew his father, Ouranos, by wounding him with a sickle given to him by his mother, Gaia. Kronos then became king of the Titans. To avoid any of his children doing the same thing to him, he ate all of his children as they were born. Oh, that's rather gruesome, isn't it? Do we have a nicer painting of that? Ooh, that's worse. Oh well. But his wife tricked him into eating a rock instead of his sixth child, so Zeus fought against him in a war called the Titanomachy, and Kronos and the Titans lost. Zeus threw Kronos into Tartarus in the underworld for eternal punishment. At least that's the later version, the version you'll know if you learned your mythology from a modern textbook or from Percy Jackson. In the earliest versions we have, Kronos goes on to become king of the Isle of the Blessed in the underworld. He rules the perfect land that grants eternal happiness to the greatest of heroes. If that fact seems odd, there's a good reason for it. Kronos' time as king on Earth is called the Golden Age. No one had to work, because Kronos, god of the harvest, with his sickle, made sure the earth provided everything that everyone needed. There were no societies or hierarchies, so everyone was equal. There was no such thing as morals, because everyone always did the right thing. It was Zeus who introduced the need for work and social distinctions as punishment for humankind receiving fire. So why isn't Zeus the bad guy here? He took away our perfect world and created both work and inequality. Well, the Greeks saw the Golden Age as anarchy as well as perfect harmony. Remember that Kronos was overthrown for eating his children. There he is. For the Greeks, Kronos represented both an innocent time before the need for laws and the horrifying violence that was possible if one lives without restrictions. Two sides of the same coin. Zeus represented order, which brought both stability and repression. Zeus was culture, Kronos was savagery. Now on to the Roman Saturn. Like Kronos, Saturn was a fallen god who had ruled over his own golden age in Italy. But Saturn's golden age was of a different character. Saturn brought agriculture and civilization to Italy. While the Greek Kronos ruled over a pre-agricultural anarchy, the Roman Saturn brought in his golden age by teaching the Italians farming and civilization. The Romans considered Saturn one of the earliest kings of Italy, a foreigner who brought new order. And just like Kronos, Saturn's golden age had a dark side. The Romans believed that their ancestors gave human sacrifices to Saturn. Human sacrifice is one of the chief taboos of Roman culture. According to legend, it was Hercules who came to Italy and stopped the human sacrifices, further civilizing the Italians. Saturn was a god of contrasts, a culture hero who had to be overthrown, a benevolent king who cannibalized his own family, an imprisoned god who represented freedom, a bringer of peace worshipped with blood. When worshipping Saturn, the Romans didn't just emphasize the positive aspects and ignore the negative. These aspects always coexisted. They were two sides of the same coin. The worship of Saturn is very old in Rome. The temple of Saturn was consecrated in 497 BCE, and there had been an altar to Saturn on the same site that was very old even when it was replaced with the temple. The Temple of Saturn held the Roman treasury, so it was a busy and important temple for all of Rome's history. And the Saturnalia festival goes all the way back to the very first Roman calendar we have preserved. In Greece, Kronos was more a figure of mythology than of active worship, but in Rome, Saturn was a very active and present god. The Saturnalia began as a single-day festival on December 17th, the middle holiday in a series of 3 that possibly celebrated the opening of the grain stores as winter began. This was a time of anxiety, the switch from fall to winter, when Romans had to rely on what they'd stored and hope it was sufficient and wouldn't spoil. So they celebrated Saturn, the god of the bygone Golden Age. As the Romans hunkered down at the beginning of winter, they dreamed of a world without the need to work, where everything was given for free and everyone was equal. To simulate that golden age, all official business shut down, and all social distinctions were eliminated. Slaves ate together with their masters as equals. The Saturnalia quickly became one of the Romans' favorite festivals, so they were expanded. First to 3 days, from December 17th to 19th, then eventually to at least 7, ending on December 23rd. On December 17th, the Saturnalia would begin in the Temple of Saturn. Saturn's statue had its feet bound with wool during the rest of the year, representing chains that usually held Saturn prisoner. On the 17th, Saturn's feet would be unbound. Saturn's statue would be placed on a decorated couch like a distinguished guest, and the Romans would have a public sacrifice and feast in his honor. The following days were reserved for private celebrations in the home. During this time were feasts at which slaves dined with masters, or in some houses, the slaves reclined in the nice dining room and were served by their masters, who pretended to be slaves. Enslaved people were granted the libertas decembris, or December freedom. They had free speech and were allowed to curse at their masters. Gambling was popular. People of all social classes played dice, which was normally frowned upon. Heavy drinking was common. Everyone put on fancy Greek clothes in bright colors, and all social classes wore the pileus, the conical hat of freed slaves. During the Saturnalia, all Romans had been freed from slavery. The image of the pileus carried into the American and French revolutions, and it even became the mascot of the 2024 Paris Olympics. At some parties, one guest would be chosen as the Saturnalicius princeps, or Prince of Saturnalia. It was the job of the prince to give silly orders that the other guests had to follow, like break into song or jump into a pool. It was a topsy-turvy world. Up was down, wrong was right, and chaos and freedom reigned. Or at least a mock version of freedom. There was a proverb that said, "Non semper erunt Saturnalia," or "It won't always be Saturnalia." Whether you were a slave using your free speech or a guest ordering your friends to embarrass themselves, you had to be careful not to say or do anything you couldn't play off as a joke later. After the Saturnalia, everything had to go back to normal. December 19th was a centerpiece of the Saturnalia, the Sigillaria, the Day of Gifts. A sigillarium is a little statue made of wax or clay, usually of a person from mythology or some other extraordinary person. These figures were traditional gifts on the Sigillaria. There was a street in Rome that was so famous for selling them, it was named for them. But people gave all sorts of gifts on the Sigillaria: food, candles, writing supplies, cosmetics, toys, pets, even gag gifts. Gift-giving was supposed to mimic the abundance of wealth during Saturn's golden age, so everyone was supposed to give gifts to everyone they were close to. But they were supposed to be small, cheap gifts. The Saturnalia were a time of equality, so giving gifts that showed off how rich you were would have been seen as crass. Some Romans even thought that the cheaper the gift, the closer the friendship. Catullus referred to Sigillaria as the best of days. It's no wonder that the Saturnalia were so popular with the Romans. A period of 3 to 7 days with no work, fun parties with your friends, gifts, and a mock rejection of the rigid social hierarchies that governed Roman society. Yo Saturnalia! That's how you wish someone happy Saturnalia. They remained popular even after the rise of Christianity. The early Christian church placed Christ's birthday on December 25th, for reasons that had nothing to do with Saturnalia. Possibly it was to cover over the birthday of Sol Invictus, or the unconquered sun. But Christmas was close enough that lay people celebrated it using many of the old Saturnalia traditions, including gift-giving, feasting, and gambling. Christmas wasn't the holiday we know today for most of European history. It was 12 days long and full of the sorts of topsy-turvy chaos encouraged in the Saturnalia. Some areas still even picked a Saturnalicius princeps, retitled the Lord of Misrule. Christmas was so wild that many groups of Protestant reformers tried to ban it. But in the 19th century, Christmas was tamed to the shorter, more family-friendly version we know today. Not much of the Saturnalia survive in modern Christmas. Other than the feasting, which would probably have happened even if there was no such thing as Saturnalia, only the gift-giving remains to bring back the age of Saturn. So this December 17th, spare a thought for Saturn, the god in chains who is released for a few days every year to bring back his golden age. Put on your freedman's cap, pick a Lord of Misrule, and buy your friends the cheapest gifts you can find to tell them how much they mean to you. Yo Saturnalia! While you're here, don't forget to subscribe and check out the rest of my videos about Roman history. I'm also a writer, and you can find my work and a lot more on my Instagram account, @maddie.way. Waldete and happy holidays.